So I watched Scream and it was about as original as its title. I really can't stand this recent trend of just naming sequels after the original movies. It's one thing to give a reboot or remake the same exact title, but when it's a sequel in the very same franchise, it kind of makes things confusing and annoying. Hey, let's watch the sequel to Candyman. Which one? Candyman! Hey, let's watch the prequel to The Thing. What's it called? The Thing! It makes these new movies harder to stand on their own, and it also feels manipulative, as if you're rebranding for a newer generation, but still riding the coattails of the original because you have nothing new to offer. You know what? I'm calling this movie Five Cream. Not only is it funny to say, but it also distinguishes this movie from the original Scream. You know, what a movie title is supposed to do? Distinguishes itself from other movies? Okay, bad start. So anyway, I watched Five Cream, and it was honestly no better or worse than the other Scream sequels. Now I should preface this by saying that I'm not a fan of Scream to begin with. The original is heralded as a subversive horror film that breaks new ground in the genre's storytelling, but if I'm being honest, it's really not that great. It's boring and insanely cliched and is more focused on winking to the audience instead of telling an actual subversive story. It's a meta-commentary on horror in the same way that Deadpool is a meta-commentary on superhero films. It's not clever or funny, it's just pointing out that horror cliches exist, and then the characters partake in those cliches. Haha, only dumb characters in horror movies go upstairs. Oh no, Ghostface gotta go upstairs! This isn't clever, it's still stupid even if you point out how stupid it is. Oh, and did I mention the numerous jump scare fake-outs? This is no different from any cliched horror film, and yet people still praise it. Not just, oh, it's pretty cool, it's a standard slasher. No, people genuinely praise this and the sequels as one of the greatest horror franchises ever. With that said, at least the first movie had an idea and ran with it. The rest of the sequels are obviously trying to recapture the original and fail miserably. Each one is worse than the last, and they get way more blatant in their subversions to the point that you can easily tell where the movie is going. Wow, you said one thing, but you actually meant a different thing. I didn't see that coming! And it all culminates into this most recent movie where it's easily the most egregious. Now I'll be fair and say this wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I was expecting a lazily written retread with no cool kills that's way more interested in sucking the first movie's dick instead of trying to stand on its own. But I'll give the movie credit, it did have one good kill towards the end. And aside from that, the movie is still annoying. I don't know why they wanted to make this movie, because the Scream franchise already made a movie that was poking fun at reboots. Scream 4 was already a sequel made years later trying to reinvent the franchise. But I guess that one didn't mention Reddit, whereas this one did, so there. I guess this one has a whole different perspective to it. There's also this weird underlying theme about the dangers of nerd culture and fans of franchises going apeshit over bad movies and beloved franchises. Oh yeah. I'm sure Hollywood will do a bang-up job at representing the true horrors of obsessive fan culture. I expect nothing but the most nuanced and profound observations about fandom culture coming from the same writer as Amazing Spider-Man 2. Haha, I subverted your expectations there. See, I said I expected one thing from this movie, but actually, I have the exact opposite opinion. I do, in fact, not think the writer of Amazing Spider-Man 2 could write nuanced and profound observations about fan culture. Not impressed? Well, that's the level of subversions we're dealing with in this movie. They think you expect one thing, they do the exact thing you can see coming a mile away. It's not surprising in the slightest. I like the part when one of the characters was watching a YouTube video on the recent in-universe version of Scream and the YouTubers were complaining about how the recent movie is terrible. Thanks, movie. Now I know not to make a YouTube video complaining about how shitty this movie is, because you already predicted that I would. Oh wait, I subverted your expectations again! I'm actually making a YouTube video right now, see? I love meta-commentary that has no subtlety or nuance. Haha, got you again! That's not really what I think, you just got subverted, sucker!
There was a little Spanish flea
Okay, back to the review. Every character in this movie was either spewing rules about horror films or spewing cliched lines you'd hear in a standard horror film. Now this is a problem with the franchise as a whole because I feel like I'm supposed to take Scream seriously for some reason. Even though half of the movie the characters are practically winking towards the camera and making fun of horror movies, I'm still supposed to feel the grand weight of the stakes for these characters surviving. And also feel sad when some of them die. One scene the characters are crying and taking the scene seriously. The next, the movie is trying to make you laugh with fake-outs that aren't funny. Scream has always had an inconsistent tone problem, and it's no different here. Speaking of inconsistent, there's this weird subplot about the main character being related to Billy Loomis from the first movie, and apparently it was supposed to be a twist that she wasn't the killer, but the movie did such a terrible job at establishing that. Also, it tries to paint Billy Loomis as a good guy by the end because her vision of him points to where a knife is so she can defend herself from the real killer? You see what I mean when I say Scream has a tone problem? Am I supposed to be charmed by this scene or be utterly disgusted? Billy was the main villain in the first movie. Now he's a good guy? This isn't like Luke Skywalker or the toys from Toy Story. You know, we don't get warm fuzzy nostalgia tingles from seeing Billy fucking Loomis. Whatever, the movie ends saying "for Wes" in honor of Wes Craven, so I guess that makes this boring ass movie absolved of any criticism. Okay, is there anything of value in this movie? Well, like I said, there was one cool kill. It's when Monica shot one of the killers and they fell backwards into a lit stove with hand sanitizer on their face and they burned to death. It was quickly made lame when they tried making a one-liner about passing the torch, and then later on they came back only to get shot in an unfunny fake-out. But, credit where credit is due, I was impressed with the idea of death by burning hand sanitizer. Which is more than I can say for a lot of horror films, so good job, Five Cream, you did one good thing. Honestly, that's about it. I have very little to say about this movie outside of I'm not impressed with this movie and its attempts at subverting horror tropes. It was about as lazily pandering as the rest of the franchise, so I can't really say I'm all that disappointed. But that's exactly my point. I can't stand these movies and their meta-commentary. It's especially hard to take them seriously when most of the time the characters are just practically saying, "This is just like a horror movie." And then the other scenes are some of the most non-self-aware horror movie bullshit you'll see in one of these films. I can't even classify these as standard horror movies. Most of the kills aren't that cool. The one kill I actually liked wasn't knife-based, the kind of kill Scream is supposedly famous for. How am I supposed to praise something if it can't do the one thing it's famous for properly? I'm not kidding when I say I'd rather watch the most standard and hokey 80s teen slashers over this. Those movies are dumb and samey, but at least they're not selling you bullshit. They are exactly the kind of movies they are advertising. Standard, schlocky horror. This is trying to sell you a hokey standard slasher film and a deconstruction of the slasher film, and it can't do either. If you want my advice, watch the first Scream movie. If you think it's the pinnacle of horror subversions like so many other people, then you'll probably like Five Cream a lot. But if you can't get into it like me, avoid this movie and all the other sequels because there really is nothing for you to find. If you want to watch an actual subversive horror film, I recommend One Cut of the Dead. It's a Japanese zombie film that actually takes advantage of horror tropes and crafts something unique and original. I'm not showing any clips because I genuinely want those of you who have never heard of it to go in completely blind. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I hope they stop making Scream movies forever and that we stop getting movies written by the same guy who wrote Independence Day Resurgence and Zodiac? What the fuck is going on here?